like, naming, shaming, attacking people who aren't like politicians or who haven't committed a crime. I don't get pleasure out of naming and shaming teachers. I don't. And I get it. And I get we have a big reach, and especially when someone like Libs of TikTok picks up. I am sure that Karina Champion, I saw she locked down her social media accounts. I'm sure that she has been targeted by some vitriol. I don't ever like to see that happen. But this is someone who is indicative of what's wrong with our public education system and who is spewing her political and social agenda at kids who are in middle school and seeing no meaningful repercussions for it. And unless we name and shame some of these teachers and demand action and accountability, nothing's going to get better. So I don't love doing it, but I feel compelled to have to do it. So in case you didn't read or watch our exclusive reporting on this last week, Karina Champion, she teaches math and science in the Olympia Regional Learning Academy, which is part of the Olympia Public School District. And she was a guest in a 6th grade classroom in that school where she was supposed to be talking, it was a science class, and she was supposed to be talking about a project to make a quilt depicting different types of plants and insects. And instead, she went on this unhinged rant that a 6th grader was so disturbed by, the little 6th grader felt the need to record it, where Karina Champion talked about how Ronald Reagan was a homophobe and he's responsible for people dying of HIV/AIDS. And then she also ranted a completely lie-filled rant about Trayvon Martin. Here's a clip.
So Trayvon Martin was a kid who was a little bit older than you. He was 13 years old. He went to go walk to the corner store and got some Skittles and an iced tea for his brother. And on his way home, a white supremacist was following him in his truck and yelling at him, and then got out and killed him. And the person who killed him did not go to jail, was not charged because of a racist law that's currently in Florida that allows people to kill someone else if they are scared. And how this law is generally applied is by white supremacists who say they were scared just by the presence of a black or brown person.
Yeah, obviously that's not true, but she would have gotten away with this had it not been for a 6th grader who, again, decided, hey, I'm going to record this and show my mom. So last week on the show, we had on the mother of that 6th grader and talked about it. And we also put out this exclusive report that you could have read. We did a written story about it too, going into more detail about this incident in Karina Champion. And in that report, I had mentioned, we put that this is not the first time that this particular Olympia Regional Learning Academy has been the subject of controversy. And we talked about a report from the Olympian from 2019. We just mentioned it offhand because hey, we're talking about this that happened with Karina Champion. But also at this school, there was this headline from the Olympian in 2019. Orla failed to alert parents sex ed was starting. Parents says content was inappropriate. And it says, and it's quoting a couple parents saying that a teacher at ORLA had a sex ed lesson that parents didn't approve and that they weren't warned about, and that this particular teacher used a dildo in class as part of the sex ed lesson. So I had just thrown that in hey, we've done a bunch of stories on the Olympia School District. So while we're talking about Karina Champion and her political and social rant, I should also mention this happened at the school in 2019, only to find out that the unnamed teacher who brought a dildo to class that was reported in the Olympian is Karina Champion. You cannot make this stuff up. So we find out, and all of a sudden, Nicole's inundated with messages from parents saying, hey, the dildo teacher is the same teacher as Karina Champion. And not only were parents saying this, the parents who were involved who had a kid in that class in 2019, where Karina Champion brought in a dildo. Sorry, yes, I'm using the word dildo a lot on their show today. Kids had to hear about it. They got copied. They were part of a full-fledged official investigation in 2019 into Karina Champion's conduct. And they provided us with a copy of that investigation. So an outside entity was brought in. They called it a pre-litigation program. So I don't know if they thought maybe a teacher or a parent would sue over this dildo sex ed lesson. So they brought in this outside entity called Clear Risk Solutions to do a full-fledged investigation in 2019 into Karina Champion. And there were multiple allegations they investigated, 7 allegations total, that she violated 7 different policies, including transporting students in her private vehicle for a non-emergency purpose, using a chaperone who was under the age of 21 during 2 field trips, discussing inappropriate topics during sex ed classes, using a sex toy, a dildo, to demonstrate how to apply a condom, failing to notify parents about the sex ed presentation, allowing students to use cell phones during class, and allowing volunteers from a pizza kitchen to meet alone with students without conducting proper criminal background checks. So those were all the allegations that parents brought forth against Karina Champion back in 2019. And there was this full-fledged investigation. Now, the investigation found she was guilty of some of them. Other ones, there was one that was unfounded, like the pizza kitchen thing, saying that these volunteers weren't put through proper background checks. That was an unfounded allegation. But most of the allegations, there was a finding that, yes, she did violate the policy, or there wasn't enough information to prove it. For instance, on the dildo thing. So allegation 4, Ms. Champion used a sex toy to demonstrate how to apply a condom during sex education classes with 7th and 8th grade students. So as part of that investigation, they spoke to parents, they spoke to three different parents, a student who was in the class, the principal, and Karina Champion herself. Now, one of the students that spoke to this investigator said, and we're blocking out the student's name, the student told me Miss Champion used a pink and purple sparkly dildo to show the class how to put a condom on. She said Miss Champion was the first person to use the word dildo. One of the parents, a parent named Kim Johnson, Miss Johnson said her son was in a sex education class this past school year. She said her son told her that Miss Champion used the word dildo when describing the model of a penis she used to show students how to put a condom on. She said the student told her the dildo was purple and had a suction cup on the end of it. Miss Johnson said Miss Champion later blamed the student for blurting out the word dildo. She told me she does not believe Miss Champion because Miss Champion has lied to her before, and because her child's internet use at home is restricted, and the child admitted to looking up the word dildo after school the day Miss Champion used it because he did not know what it meant. So in this investigation, you've got the student saying, hey, my kid says that she had this pink and God, how many times am I going to say dildo? Do I have to say dildo in one show? She had this pink and purple suction cup at the end, sparkly sex toy, that Miss Champion called it a dildo and used it to show him how to put a condom on. And Karina Champion, who was interviewed by this investigator, says, Miss Champion told me the dildo was manufactured as an anatomically correct teaching aid and is not a sex toy. Yeah, okay. Yeah, they make teaching aids for middle schoolers that are a pink and purple sparkly dildo with a suction cup at the end. Yeah, okay. She told me the teaching aid is a replica of a male penis and is dark purple in color. She told me teaching students how to correctly put on a condom is part of the 7th and 8th grade flash curriculum. Miss Champion said a student from the back of the classroom yelled the word dildo when she brought the teaching aid out. She said she corrected the student by referring to the device as an anatomically correct teaching aid. Does anyone believe her? Does anyone believe her, knowing what we know about her? Hearing the audio of her caught on tape talking about Ronald Reagan, homophobia, Trayvon Martin, all this stuff. And now she's saying, oh, no. A student shouted dildo. And I told them that this pink and purple sparkly sparkly object with a suction cup at the end was actually an anatomically correct teaching aid. Give me a freaking break. So anyway, we have this investigative report. And then, like I said, Nicole was just inundated with messages from parents about this. And so one of the parents whose daughter was a 7th grader in this class where they weren't told about the sex ed lesson, where, a dildo was used. Her name is Jamie Hinton. She agreed to come on the show and talk to us today. She also pointed out, so this is 2019. So her child who was a 7th grader just graduated. She has another child who's a junior and is no longer in the Olympia school district because of this incident. Took him out, did some online learning, and then now is in, I think, the North Thurston school district because of this incident in 2019. So Jamie Hinton was nice enough and brave enough to come on and talk about this investigation into her child's former teacher, Karina Champion. So we do this story on this teacher, Karina Champion, last week. Um, and we were not aware, we were aware of this dildo incident because it had been in the news, but we did not know it was the same teacher until parents came forward. So I guess when you saw the video that we had last week of Karina Champion going on this political rant, what did you think?
Again, we're like, they didn't do anything to censor her. They didn't do anything to protect these kids from this misinformation.
Yeah. So take us back a few years now to 2019 when this incident happened. Your child was in seventh or eighth grade, because I know she teaches both.
Seventh.
Seventh grade. So my understanding of the situation is that they were in a class that was, or a lesson that was supposed to be kind of about relationships and stuff, and how to manage them. Can you explain your understanding of what they were supposed to be learning about?
It was a health class.
Okay. So
So
some
there's supposed
stuff
to
is
be
going to come
health
up.
sex ed.
Yeah. But were you told this particular day what kind of lesson there would be, that there would be kind of a sex ed specific lesson?
No, we were not notified that they would be teaching sex ed, so we could had the option of opting our kids out.
Yeah, which is required, and we'll get to that in a moment because there was an investigation done into all of this. So, as a mom, when did you first become aware that this lesson had gone off the rails quite a bit?
The day it happened.
And how'd you find out?
I had a friend who was a teacher there, and she stopped me and said, "You need to ask your daughter what was on the board today." And I'm like, "What?" She's like, "Just ask her." And my daughter came out of class, and I said, "Rory, what was on the board today?" Her eyes instantly went to the floor, and she started to get emotional. And I was like, "What the heck is going on?" And we sat down with her and another classmate, and she told us exactly what was talked about and discussed. And we had some questions we asked her too, because it's a sensitive subject. I understand girls are going to be a little more sensitive, um, but we were appalled.
So, what was on the board? And don't mince words if that it was
No,
shown to
there
kids.
was,
So,
from my understanding, from the actually one of the students took notes, one of the girls, was ways to prevent pregnancy and STDs. And the first thing was, or pregnancy, and it was permanent sterilization was number one on the list. Non-vaginal penetration.
so anal
Uh,
sex.
yeah, she didn't put that on there, but it was very clear that was the thing. And then I just had some clarifying questions for my daughter. I'm like, "So did you guys discuss abstinence?" And she's like, "What is that, Mom?" Okay. Which is supposed to be the majority of the topic they're supposed to talk about.
So, sterilization, permanent sterilization was brought
Yep.
up with your seventh grade daughter.
It was the top of the list.
Oh my God. So,
Mhm.
is this the same day, same lesson as the dildo?
Yes.
Okay. So, what did you hear from your daughter about the dildo?
So what she relayed to me and the two other girls, or the one girl and the gentleman also, was that they walked into class. She walked into class, went over to a cabinet, pulled it out, and stuck it on the counter. It's a pink, purple, sparkly dildo. And she used the word.
So this is where there's some discrepancy. So was an investigation done, and
Mhm.
Karina Champion is essentially saying all the dirty words, all the dildo talk, the anal talk, all that stuff. The kids were saying this stuff. I didn't bring up the word dildo, and you disagree with that. Your child disagrees with that.
Two of the girls disagreed that she was the first one to say it. I'm more upset that my daughter knew what that word was before she knew what abstinence was. Um, and she was mortified.
I mean, I'm mortified. I'm mortified that we're having this conversation, right? And but the thing is like whenever we talk about stuff like this, I feel like you have to be just as vulgar and descriptive as the teacher was with kids. Because it's like if kids had to sit through it, let's sit through it and talk about the same stuff and see how uncomfortable we get about it, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and I understand kids are going to ask the questions to get a reaction, but as adults, we're supposed to redirect it to appropriate stuff.
right. Right. So there's a little bit of difference. They took Karina Chapman, they did this investigation, and she basically says, oh, I didn't use that kind of verbiage. The kids use that kind of verbiage. And it's just kind of her word versus the students, right? Yeah. So what happened to, what do you know how the school disciplined her?
No, because we were told that we couldn't get that information. And I know that in the report it said that there was a write-up done for part of it for not notifying the parents. And I understand you need, tools, visual tools for kids, but my expectation is you use proper terminology so they know what it is. And it should be a replica of a male sex organ and make it a realistic color. I don't care what color it is, but pink, purple, sparkly is not.
No, that's a sex toy. That's a
Yeah.
sex toy. That's ridiculous. And that's kind of how in this investigation they get around finding her at fault for that is like, well, it allows you to have sort of something to demonstrate what it is. And like, look, if it's an atomically correct male penis and you want to put a condom on that, fine. They did find her, like you said, she did not give proper notice to parents. So that was something that the investigator said, yeah, she failed to do that. And there were some other things that were unrelated to this class. She was accused of, bringing kids places in her personal vehicle, etc. As a parent at the time, what was your expectation of what would happen to this teacher?
I would expect that she wouldn't be teaching this subject. I would expect that there would be some oversight by the district to make sure these situations don't happen again. And I understand sex ed's a hard topic, but the whole point of it is for us parents to start the conversation. They get education from people that are supposed to be, they look up to their teachers, and then we come back and continue that conversation for healthy practices. But that's not what happened.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is a no brainer stuff. Like, hey, there's a place for this kind of conversation for kids, making sure that they know about abstinence and some of the risks that can be associated with having sex and STDs and all of that stuff. But, talk to parents about it. Like, let's cover the basics and let parents talk about anything above and beyond the basics. I mean, talking to seventh graders about permanent sterilization, I can't imagine that's part of any sort of curriculum you would have approved your daughter learn about.
Oh, absolutely not.
Yeah. So now knowing, here we are 5 years later, you have this teacher who, again, no notification for parents, goes and visits a sixth grade class, goes into this rant about Ronald Reagan, homophobia, Trayvon Martin, white supremacy, and we're still being told parents can't know what the punishment is. I mean, what, in the eyes of a parent, do you want the district to know about your frustration with this?
They should be open. We are entrusting them with our kids. And I wouldn't send my kids there ever again. And I will start by saying Orla is an amazing program. It is. It's just those individuals that they're using it for their own platform. And that was premeditated.
Yeah.
If
And
you're looking,
sorry, you said you have a friend who's a teacher as well. And this is something I think about a lot. What do you think teachers like Karina Champion and stories like this, how do they reflect on other teachers in that district?
it makes them all look bad.
Yeah.
It really does. And it's not a bad area. It's not a bad system in itself. It's just they're not doing the right thing for the students. They're not protecting the students.
Yeah. Here you are speaking up. We spoke to Jake, the mother of one of the sixth graders, last week. First time she'd ever, I'm assuming this is the first time you've ever done a news interview about this.
Yeah.
Yeah. What would you say to other parents who are frustrated, but just keep quiet?
You can't. You can't because like we thought that, this was going to change, standing up for our kids. And then this happening again, it's like, what if we would have stood up more and we would have, fought harder? But honestly, all of us took our kids out of the program. Well, not one of them stayed, and then it was horrible.
Wow.
There was backlash, in my opinion. That's my opinion. But yeah, it's been a constant thing.
It's just insane. And, I get it. The dildo thing grabs headlines, but more concerning to me is that she allegedly talked about medical castration to seventh graders. That, that's the way to avoid, getting pregnant, is just make it so that you can never get pregnant again for the rest of your life, and let me implant that in your head in seventh grade. That's the accusation of this parent, but I don't know why a seventh grader would make up that medical castration was put on a whiteboard. I mean, what kind of child even knows about that? So, and frankly, I am very inclined to believe what the students say and the parents say over what Karina Champion says, because we see now that she has a pattern of this kind of conduct. And there is no reason, no setting we're bringing what is clearly a sex toy. God forbid it was her personal sex toy. I don't know. In the document, the principal says that she got it from another teacher. God forbid it's that teacher's personal sex toy. Who knows? It doesn't belong in a classroom. Weirdos. It's just crazy. And these things are not happening on an island. It's not like we're choosing the one teacher who's done one thing wrong and everyone else, there's no problems at all. No, there's a clear pattern here. At some point, you have to stop claiming that these things are rare when they happen that often. I mean, in the Olympia school district alone, which I believe is one of the worst school districts in the country in terms of political and social agendas being pushed on kids, just by virtue of the number of stories that we alone have done. I mean, kids being segregated on the basis of race for social groups because it's not safe to be around white kids for black students. Like that was fourth graders or something. We did, and this is relevant to this story, and I want to bring it up for that purpose. When you talk about the influence of teachers like this. So remember last year, we had an exclusive report on another Olympia school district teacher named Jennifer Knight that started a secretive relationship, email, texting relationship with a 10-year-old because the 10-year-old believed that they were transgender. So 10-year-old girls coming to school, a child of immigrants, coming to school and is identifying as a boy at school by a different name, and under OSPI guidelines and rules, you hide that information from parents unless the kid wants their parents to know. So it's okay for the teachers to know, okay for fellow students to know, okay for staff to know that, little Debbie's coming to school and identifying as Derek, but not okay to tell the parents that. So this teacher, Jennifer Knight, had engaged in this secret email exchange with a 10-year-old saying, delete these messages so your parents don't find out or you'll be outed instantly, saying, I'd take you into my home anytime. Weird stuff. That's completely inappropriate. Well, one of the things that was pointed out to us in investigating Karina Champion, somebody brought up Jennifer Knight as well. Both of them are reps for their school to the Olympia Education Association, which is the school district teachers union. And we talk about the Washington Education Association a lot and the power of the teachers unions. So here you have two, what I believe are unfit teachers. Teachers who have proven that they cannot be trusted to educate other people's kids. And Jen Knight is the representative to the Olympia Education Association for Lincoln, and Karina Champion is the representative to the Olympia Education Association for Orla. So of course, then you have two teachers who are inarguably unfit, who are then fighting, on behalf of their schools in the teachers union. And what are they going to be fighting for? Of course, they're going to be fighting against policies that make it easier for parents to know what's happening in classrooms, because look at what they're doing in classrooms. They don't want parents involved. Karina wants to push her political. She wants to talk about how Ronald Reagan is a homophobe and because of him, people died of AIDS. She wants to tell complete falsehoods about Trayvon Martin and its white supremacy and Florida's evil and all these things. And Jen Knight wants to use her job as a teacher to push radical gender ideology on kids, so much so that the parents of that 10-year-old girl, when they found out that Jen Knight was having a secretive email communication with their child, they didn't just leave the district, they left the country. Immigrants to the United States. The Olympia School District was so bad and they were so horrified by what happened there that they took their child back to the country they emigrated from. Come on, that's insane. And now these are the people answering, going to the Olympia Education Association, and part of the most powerful union ecosystem in the state, the teachers union. And I will just say, all of this I think is relevant under the backdrop of 2081, the Parental Rights Initiative, that got more than 420,000 signatures, that Democrats and Republicans in the legislature passed into law this session, and that now the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction is like, I don't think we're going to follow aspects of that. And now there's lawsuits trying to overturn the will of voters and the will of parents and the will of the legislature, because they are so eager to allow teachers like this to continue to teach. Karina Champion doesn't belong anywhere near a classroom. Now we have a 6-year history to refer to. And on top of all of that, if I may just rant for one moment longer, we're told we don't get to know what the disciplines are. We didn't get to know what the discipline was for Jennifer Knight, who's telling a 10-year-old, delete these emails between us so your parents don't find out. We don't get to know what the discipline was for Karina Champion when she brought a dildo to class and told 7th graders that medical castration was an option to avoid pregnancy. And we don't get to know. Nicole, have you to date heard back from the Olympia School District?
No, I have not.
Oh, shock of the century.
No
they don't
email.
care. They don't want to answer. Why would they answer to us? They don't answer to us. They don't care. They don't answer to the media. And the teachers' unions are so powerful that they negotiate these contracts where that's part of it. You pay their salaries, and then you're kept in the dark. You pay their salaries, and then they tell your kid, delete our email threads. You pay their salaries, and then teachers like Karina Champion go to class and talk about how Ronald Reagan's a homophobe and talk about white supremacy. How is that right? Anyone paid with taxpayer funds should be fully accountable to the taxpayers, and especially the parents. Especially, think about that for a second. Jake, the mom who joined us last week to talk about Karina Champion's rant, she doesn't get to know what the discipline is for Karina Champion. Jamie, the mom we had on today, whose teacher had, whose child, 7th grade child, had a dildo plopped down right in front of her, suction cup to the table, who was told about medical castration, she doesn't get to know what the discipline was for her child's former teacher. That is wrong. And then you have the head of our public school system who absolutely does not care that more than 400,000 Washington voters and both parties in Olympia said, yes, we value parental notification, and now he's trying to get around it. Shameful. Shameful. Absolutely shameful. And like I said at the beginning, just to bring it full circle, I don't like having to do this. I don't like having to put individual teachers on blast who aren't politicians. But this is what you forced us to do, because you're trying to get away with all these things behind the scenes. And unless we say, and parents say, God bless the parents who've come forward in the last week on this issue, unless you come forward and say, no, we're not doing that anymore. We'll name and shame until these school districts are so, guilted, can't stand the public scrutiny, that we'll finally do something about it. And I'm grateful to Libs of TikTok for putting this story out there, because again, it takes, I guess, a little bit of shaming for something to happen. So we'll continue to follow up on this story. In fact, we have more updates on this story. We just can't fit them all into one day. And so we'll have some more updates on this tomorrow.